We came to school, had classes. We met in our cafeteria. What you see now as the dining hall was much smaller. It was just kind of front of the hall, from side to side where it is now, from the mahogany room to the other side. But it didn't go as deep. A lot of that has been renovated since I was here. But at one end was our pub, and on one end was our grill. So in the morning we had, eggs and bacon and, English muffins on one end and coffee, and on the other end we had our beer and our chips at the end of the night. So that was our place to meet. That's where we all met. We also did our studying. Sometimes it was difficult to study at home. You have brothers and sisters and everybody running around. As a commuter student, it was really hard to study. So we found our library, which was fairly new at the time, by the way, in the 70s, where we'd spend a lot of time in our library. And we had those little rooms, like downstairs where you have now the current Jan Drusevich Learning Center was an area where we had publications, magazines, and different things like that. So we would meet down there as a group. A lot of us in our classes would say, we'll meet down there at a certain time. We'll do some of our class study. And so the library was another place of big life for us around here. A little different, a little more quiet, not kind of as crazy, but it was a place of life.
Some of us who were young at the time, we were designated as the Young Turks by, I think we were given the name by one of the older faculty members. And one of the less academic activities on campus happened one night at a university party, which the Young Turks all boycotted, only to delightfully hear the next day that in the midst of the party, a fist fight had broken out, a little barroom brawl, which we could not be accused because none of us were there. So the troublemakers were not on scene when the trouble started.
That's right. That was the older faculty. The younger faculty were busy thinking big ideas and marching and protesting and being arrested for being protesters against the war.
We had the best mixers on campus. They were the Friday night pub nights. We had live bands. We had live bands here all the time. We had some great live bands, and there was just a lot of fun and enthusiasm around those Friday night events. And, we'd sit and you had to collect IDs and get in, and, you had to pay your fee. But you had the live band, and you had food that we would, somebody would sponsor it, a fraternity, a sorority, a class group, or a club. Every Friday night would be sponsored by somebody different. And they would provide the snacks and stuff, and that the proceeds from the door, they would pick the band, the group, or whatever, and the proceeds at the door would cover the expenses, and then that extra money would be left for the club. So Friday nights at Sacred Heart was a big thing. There was a time when we had an underground newspaper, student newspaper, and I can't even remember what it was called, the Grapevine or something. I mean, I would have to have it. Thank God I had a blotter on my desk. God forbid anybody ever saw me reading it. But, students would, come up and hey, Miss Savino, and I'm like, I don't slip this under my blotter because I don't want anybody seeing me read it. It was kind of a big deal. They would take, all of these, But you have to think, in those early days, it was like a little student upheaval, like a little bitty, itty-bitty riot kind of stuff. It was, they could have used the school newspaper for it, but, they didn't, they used their own little means. So it was the underground newspaper, so it was like you had the regular, I can't even remember if it was called it's called the Spectrum now, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was called the Obelisk years ago. Yeah, the Obelisk.
We had sit-ins. Jeff May, I think, was our version of Mark Rudd at the time. And we had sit-ins. We boycotted classes and had the sit-ins, especially during the time of Kent State. And I remember a number of us at graduation had worn, black armbands in protest of the war. But, we, on our own sort of, we were young commuters school.
Yeah, we had protesting here on campus. Now, I'm a little new. I wasn't actually here on campus then. I was still in high school. I was in high school at the time when many of my friends were being drafted. My high school friends right out of college, high school, I was a freshman and, seniors were being drafted. And then, you're getting close to the period of time, where guys only 2 years ahead of us were getting their draft numbers, and their draft pick. And here finally in 70, they all had their draft numbers and they were ready to go. And, in 73, the war kind of wound down, and thankfully they didn't have they didn't have to go. But I knew a lot of students in the area, of course, being locally and involved in coming here to the campus to do, events and things here on campus, and at Notre Dame across the street. You could see a lot of students came to college just to avoid the draft, because there was a point in time where you could be a full-time student and avoid the draft as long as you were in college. So there was a lot of kids that would have necessarily not gone to college at all, because college, and you think in the 1970s, well, today college is a necessity. Everybody had to have it, and they have to even have a master's degree today. College wasn't for everybody in those days. College, you didn't have maybe 50% of your high school class was going to college, and it was the rare students like myself who had parents that had gone to college. So, a lot of students came here because of the war. And we did have some little riots. I wouldn't say that they were like major sit-ins and big things. We had our little stuff. We were a little place. We did things very peacefully. There was never anything, I would say, that was ever noted that Sacred Heart had anything that was maybe as big as maybe University of Bridgeport. If there was going to be any big protests or anything big, it was going to come from UB. That was the place where it was going to come. That's where it was the city unto itself. But it wouldn't have come from here.
Draft deferments were eliminated for college students.